Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Right. My name is Damien Joseph. I'm the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Academics at the Nanyang Business School. I'm also a Associate Professor of Information Technology. So thank you for joining us this afternoon, especially on this long weekend and start of this long weekend. For the next hour or so, I hope to at least try and raise the awareness with you about how business analytics improves problem solving and decision making. So business analytics, as you know, is one of the specializations in the business degree program at the Nanyang Business School. I teach in that program and I teach at multiple levels, right? So I specialize in business analytics. Together with me later, it would be one of my students that you will hear from. Right, and that would be part of the. Hang on, I can't move the. There we go. So sorry about that. Let me get back. Okay, so for the next hour or so, we have an agenda. I just covered about 4 things, right? One is about data literacy and fluency. Right? And I will describe to you what data is, why it is important. Now you've been hearing about why data is important, we'll cover that again. Right? The second thing on my agenda is to show you how we use data, right, through the business analytics process and towards what outcomes. The outcomes here are to generate business insights and to make recommendations. Right? And third would be the skills that we develop in our students. Now these skills, which are mainly experiential, will be put to use in a course project, and that's where a student, Manika, will come and present to you his take on a particular project that we had this past semester. We just finished it about 3 weeks ago, right? So it's fresh in the memory. It's also quite impactful in that sense. Right? So let's start with our understanding of data. Now there are many descriptions of data out there, and you'd read, and you can find this on the web. Right? But I like to at least take a very high level view of data and describe it in these 6 terms. Right? Let's start with volume, which is right on top. Right? Volume has to do with the amount of data that is being collected by an organization. Right? The next is velocity. Velocity is the speed at which information comes in. Right? Information can come in very fast to an organization, almost in real time. Right? That's what happens with a lot of your social media platforms. Data comes in almost continuously. In other situations, information is batched and processed when there is time on a server or an IT system somewhere. Right? So there are different ways with which data flows into an organization. Third is value. Now, value is important in the sense that there are certain data, right, which are, like, for example, descriptive. And from if you joined us this morning, my colleague Boon King would have told you about how the U.S. Federal Reserve makes decisions on the baseline interest rate. Right? In those kinds of situations, they use historical data to describe the current situation and make decisions about the current decision. It's not predictive, right? Because that's not the purpose of that data. Other data, right, allows prediction, and that's many of what your moving streaming platforms and your social media platforms do, right? They take in all the data about you and try and predict your behavior, predict what you would like to see, what you would like to hear. Right? That's why you have all these recommendations that are presented to you. And then, you can choose. The more information you provide in choosing the recommendations, the more value your data is to those platforms. The next is variability. In terms of variability, data can be static, historical, or dynamic. It changes every time. So every time you swipe a particular advertisement off your social platform list, right, it goes in real time to that platform, such that the vendor of that platform adjusts accordingly, so the next advertisement fits more towards what they think your profile is. Third is veracity, right, and that depends on whether you swipe truthfully or not. Right, there has to be how accurate the data is, how truthful the data comes in. And then finally, variety. There are many different types of data. You have numerical numbers coming in, you have textual data coming in, you have video, all right? There are pictures. And all of these contain data which the platforms can use to make decisions, right? So, all of this is nothing new, right? This process towards data analytics has started a long time. The digital transformations from when we put in computerized systems, right, to help standardize business processes, to standardize the way we do work, right, has been very key, right? So it enables operations, right? So you will notice that when you now go into a supermarket, right, the cashier no longer keys in a product code and the price, right? A scanning, right, would already capture all that data. If you hand over a customer, right, a preferential customer card for discounts, your information gets tied with that purchase, right? So taking all those enablements, right, organizations are better able to make decisions. Which products to price, which products to promote, which products to take off the shelf, right? And at the end of the day, there is impactful insights, right? People like Manika who come on will help churn the data, will help analyze the data, and provide recommendations for the organizations. These recommendations will be based on a good analysis of the data, making sure that the data is verifiable, right, is of value, and so on, right? So at the end of the day, you'll notice that, and it has been shown by research, that organizations that make data-driven or evidence-based decision-making are 5% more productive and 6% more profitable than organizations that base their decisions on gut feel, right? Just take a whack at it and see how it goes. No, right? Moving forward, the competitive edge and the competitive frontiers are based on data, which is why data is the new oil, right? And most of us give these data for free, especially when we use certain services, right? And there are many tools available for that, right? And when you come into the business school, right, the two skills that we will develop in you, one is technical, and two will be the soft skills. In terms of technical skills, right, when you come into the business school, we assume that you have zero knowledge, right? We will take you in 13 weeks or through the 2 semesters in your first year from 0 to 100. Now, in the basic skills, right, these are the kinds of courses and these are the kinds of skills that we will develop in all our undergraduate. Whether you're in the accountancy program or in the business program, right, you will be skilled in these. We'll take you through a landscape, right, of digital products, software, hardware, how they're all connected together. And then in the other course, in science and technology for humanity, we will link all of that to implications, right, for society, for individuals, right? Third, right, we can't do analytics without an understanding of statistics. So we will cover statistics, and we will assume that you have forgotten much of your statistics from your secondary school or your poly studies, right, or JC studies, right? We will get you from 0 to 100, right? And we believe that analytics is now becoming part of everybody's job. If you are going to be a decision maker, if you want to aspire to a managerial or leadership position, you need some analytical skills. And as we move forward, right, we will be training you in decision making with programming and analytics. And the programming will be simple, right? We are not asking you to develop applications here, right? You are not computer science students, right? As business students, as accountancy students, right? But you will be learning how to program, to automate your work, right? And to do simple analytics through scripts, right? And then finally, right, you need to understand, of course, the operations and the processes. So we'll give you the foundation. And then, if you choose to specialize, right, we will build your intermediate skills and your advanced skills. Right? So we'll start you again on what your databases are, how do we capture and store data. We'll go through visual and predictive analytics again, right? We'll also do advanced analytics. right, where we will build in artificial intelligence, machine learning systems, right, into your analytics. And then finally, right, you get to choose to specialize in one of three areas where our faculty have some expertise. One is on operations, right? How do we use analytics to improve business operations in supply chain, right, in service operations, that sort of thing. We use analytics in banking and finance. Most of our students end up in banks, end up in decision-making places in the banks, right? So we need to develop their analytics skills there. And third, right, as change agents. This is where we develop analytics for change, right, through business transformation, through business analytics consulting, right? Now, then that's the technical skills. Now we develop soft skills. In soft skills, right, we will go through a whole cycle, right, repeating over and over again through the 13 weeks or through the 2 years that you are with us. Very important is consulting skills here, because you will be talking to a decision maker, you will be trying to change his mind, you will be trying to understand the problems that he's facing. So recognizing the problems, defining the problems, structuring the problems, so the whole problem analysis process, right, becomes an important skill to develop, and we will develop that with you. Once you understand the problem, right, remember, these are questions that the decision maker is asking you, and it has been never thought of in an organization. These are questions that are at the forefront of somebody's mind, right? There are no ready answers. So what do you do in that sense? We train our students to undertake research, undertake analytics using all the available data, right? So to come to some understanding. So in this particular case, we are we are trying to develop students who are thinking, who are proactive, who have this investigative spirit in trying to understand something, trying to problem solve, right? And then once we find a semblance of an answer, once we come to some insights, there is this communication. The communication is important because we need to write reports, we need to present like what I'm doing now, right? Both in oral and written form. But more importantly, right, we have gone beyond the presentation. The whole point of communications is to persuade the decision maker into a certain course of action, right? So we help students through these courses, right, to develop and articulate their calls to action, right? And then finally, right, we generate the recommendations, right? We develop business strategies, right? So as a business analytics professional, right, you are at the forefront of strategic development in an organization. Right? So here's an example of a project that our students go through. Right? We typically work with an industry partner. The industry partner in this particular case provides us a problem statement. Here, right, on your right, you will notice that the problem statement is about microplastics. Right? Our particular industry partner is worried that people are ingesting about 5 grams of microplastics, right, per week. Right? And that these kinds of microplastics affect some health and outcomes, but they also affect fish farming or aquaculture. Right? So they have some questions in mind, right, that they want answered because they don't know the answers to, but they also have some objectives where they want to go through. In this particular case, right, they are looking for liabilities, right, who is responsible for microplastics being pumped into the ocean. Yeah? They are looking for recommendations. In particular, they are looking for mitigating factors, right, that help the impact of fish farming, impact on health. Right? So in this particular course, students work in teams of 5, and I had like 8 teams working on this particular project. Right? The data is provided by the organization. In this case, the data is freely available. Right? It's open source data. So they work in teams, they come up with their insights, they come up with their recommendations, and they will pitch it to the industry partner. So we have leaders from that industry partner attending the class, engaging the students, discussing with them about their recommendations, right, and trying to find the best way forward, right. Now, so instead of me walking you through that particular project, right, I have brought along Manika, who has experienced this in the past about 13 weeks, and he has just completed it, right. So Manika, go on. Thank you very much.
So first, the thing that we wanted to understand was, why are microplastics exactly a problem? As our industry partner was so concerned about it, it would be very fitting for us to first understand the reasons for their concern and why it's such a huge problem. So on the screen you can see here, and as Prof. Damien mentioned previously, humans ingest around 5 grams of microplastics on a weekly basis. And the sources of these are from the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and the food that we eat. And to put that into perspective, 5 grams of microplastics is the equivalent of a credit card. Imagine eating one of these every single week. And not only that, plenty of studies have also shown that aquaculture, such as you can see, lobsters, fish, have plenty of plastics inside them as well. And of course, as for sources of microplastics, we've identified that water bodies and the ocean do contain quite a significant amount of microplastics, and the flow and distribution of microplastics due to, for example, the Coriolis effect, which is the earth spinning, as well as the ocean currents, would result in the distribution and dispersal of microplastics across the ocean. So for this project, as part of the business analytics process, it required us to think critically and come up with a way to accurately and properly, reasonably scope our project first. So we decided to scope our project down to focus primarily on what the sources of these microplastics are and what the factors affecting the microplastic concentration in fish are. Not lobsters, not mollusks, fish. We just focused on fish. And subsequently, the impacts of these microplastics in the fish and how they affected human population health. Quite an interesting project, definitely, and my group definitely enjoyed going through this rigorous process. And so the thing about this particular project is, when we're conveying this information, conveying our findings to our industry partner, we had to put it in the form of a story. Storyboarding was very important. And this is because people, our industry partners, would only understand and take our findings to heart when we convey it persuasively and efficiently through the use of a story. So now we've scoped our project, we've come up with something of a storyline. The next thing we had to do was gather data and build models. As an NBS student, we were exposed to a variety of analytical methods and approaches, and these include various forms of regression. So we have linear, logistic regressions, we learned about neural networks, we learned about decision trees, and these are just a few of the techniques that we've learned. And in order to continue with our project, the predictive tool that we decided to use was the linear regression model. And before we could actually use our data in this linear regression model, a lot of work had to be done transforming the data behind the scenes in order to ensure that the data satisfied assumptions associated with linear regression. These models are not simply plug and play and use the data and get some kind of result. Unfortunately, not that easy. So a lot of work, a lot of time and effort went into generating this model. And on the left, we can see one of our models is looking at the concentration of microplastics in the ocean. And you can see that it's mapped something like a weather forecast, looking at the concentration and distribution of microplastics around the globe. And we can quite clearly see that areas in coastal regions, that means along the coastline, evidently have higher microplastic concentrations than deep water regions. And so then the next logical step would be, what about the fish in these regions? And on the right, you can see that there are some regions in Belgium, Colombia, and the North Sea have much lower microplastic concentrations while other regions, such as we can see here in China, have much higher microplastic concentrations. But this information, while interesting, wouldn't be enough for our industry partner. We had to then ask ourselves, why? Why is it that these places have much higher microplastic concentrations in fish than other regions? So we decided to look at some contextual factors. And we can see, after running even a few more models, looking for more data, we found that the environment played a very significant role in the microplastic concentration observed in fish. For example, in freshwater regions, so these include some coastal regions, we found that fish in these regions had had a 0.25 more microplastic particles per gram of fish. And to put that into context, a 7 kilogram fish, which is around the weight of a salmon, would contain around 1,750 more microplastic particles, compared to its counterpart that might have been harvested from a saltwater region. And to a lesser extent, another factor that we found was the size of the fish. And this means that bigger fish we observed bigger fish having lower microplastic concentrations. But as you can see, the difference is very small, but at the same time, it is quite intuitive. It intuitively makes sense. Right, but then again, so what? We've identified what causes these factors, what causes fish to have these higher microplastic concentrations, but how does this affect us? And after considering a variety of medical issues and diseases that have been associated and attributed to microplastics, we decided to look at obesity. And we found that the microplastic concentrations in fish were actually positively associated with obesity rates in children. And the method that we went about to get this data, because this data wouldn't be something that's very easily accessible, we had to use a combination of web scraping, again, skills that are taught also in intermediate level courses. We employed a few of these techniques and methods to obtain obesity indexes for all these countries, and we looked at their import trends and patterns. So where do all these countries import their fish from? And previously we looked at some of the microplastic concentrations in the region. We used those values and came up with another model. And the outcome of our model, the results showed that for a 10% increase in microplastic concentration, we observed a 0.05 percentage point increase in male-child obesity rates. And for the same increase in microplastic concentration, we observed a 0.06 percentage point increase in female child obesity rates. While this might not seem like all that much, if you recall, the concentrations of microplastics in fish in certain regions were already very low. And a 10% increase from those values are very easily attainable and very definitely observable as well. So now we've come kind of full circle for the story. We've looked at some of the factors affecting the microplastic concentration in the fish. We've looked at how these fish affect us humans. And now, to wrap everything up, to sum everything nicely, we came up with some recommendations for our industry partner. Our recommendations are split up into two main areas. The first would be reducing plastic waste, and the second set of recommendations address the health impacts associated with the harms of DEHP. So DEHP is a plasticizer commonly used in the manufacture of plastics, and plenty of research has been done showing direct relationships between DEHP consumption and obesity rates in children. So DEHP, since we can link it to microplastics, since we can link it to obesity, is quite a solid backing for these recommendations. For our in order to reduce plastic waste, our first concrete recommendation would be to have these awareness campaigns. And these involve educating residents on the consequences of microplastic ingestion And ideally, these would utilize many of the findings and research that we have shown through this project. In terms of addressing health impacts of DEHP, one thing we could do would be licensing the use of DEHP. Introducing DEHP licenses would restrict the number of companies that would be able to use DEHP in their plastic manufacturing process. Another option would be thresholding. So we set limits on DEHP concentrations that can be used. And this has already been done for quite a few harmful chemicals already. And as a last resort kind of catch-all, we used taxation as well as incentives, so more monetary-based incentives to reduce the use of DEHP and encouraging the use of safer alternatives to DEHP. And so with that, these recommendations are catered to our industry partner. But if our industry partner, for example, was responsible for the fisheries, we could suggest, based on our previous findings, we could suggest for them to encourage fisheries to look more at farming in saltwater regions rather than freshwater regions, because we found that freshwater regions have much higher concentrations of microplastics in the fish. So again, based on our industry partner, based on the target audience that we have, we had to construct a variety of recommendations and pitch it to them. And we found that these would be the ones that would be the most receptive to. And with that, we've come to the end of my project, illustrating the impacts of microplastics and the harm, as well as how they do impact human health. So I'll now pass on the time back to Prof. Damien.
Thank you, Manika. So Manika will stay with me for a while, right? So as you can see, Manika is a third-year student, right? He came in with almost zero knowledge in terms of the analytics and in terms of this whole issue of sustainability, right? And that's what the topic is all about. It's about sustainability. And we took Manika and his cohort, right, through this whole 3-year process, from the basic skills to the intermediate skills and to the advanced skills, right, where he is. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and we will now move to Slido, where there are questions for the both of us. Oh, okay. So while we are waiting for the Slido questions to come in, right, maybe Manika, what's your best experience in that particular 13-week course?
I think it was quite interesting that based on our group's dynamics, so we had quite a variety of different skills that each of our group members possessed. Mm-hmm. Not everyone was technically would rather do the technical route, so not everyone was going to be good at coding. Not everyone is good at report writing. Not everyone is good at coming up with recommendations.
Right.
And so it's perfectly fair and reasonable to expect that people have to come in and fill in for each other. We can't expect a single person to do everything, the jack of all trades, right? Yeah, so I think something interesting was that we learned how to capitalize on each other's strengths and to make this project a success.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, here we have, we are on to Slido now, right? Is H2 computing an advantage? Before I answer that, Manika, you're from JC or Poly?
Yes, I'm
JC.
from JC.
Okay. So, let me tell you what, let Manika take this question.
Okay, sure. So I didn't take computing in JC. I took biochem, maths and econs. I don't think computing would necessarily be an advantage, because they do teach you everything, like really in the year 1, year 2, from year 1 to year 2 especially. They really go and they really nail in all these key programming languages. For example, R, Python, they teach you from scratch. So I don't think it's an advantage. Maybe you wouldn't need to focus so much on these modules if you really did. Yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily would be an advantage. Yeah.
So I suspect the advantage, just to add on to Manika, the advantage would be that you would understand many of the hardware, software, networking terms, right, that is only applicable in the basic, right, and maybe in the database course in the intermediate skills level, right. But beyond that, remember, right, in our business school program, right, we are not training you to be a computing professional. We are training you to be an analytics professional, of which, the computing is the base. You need to understand some of it, and we teach you that, right? And let me iterate again, from 0 to 100, right? You come in, we assume that you know nothing. We will take you to where you need to be. Right? Here's another question. How can I work on my digital skills while I'm still in JC? Well, you could work on your digital skills by reading up, right? If you're interested, get a head start taking up a basic Python course, right? I think it has more legs than taking up a programming class like R, I would think. Right, Monica?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's quite a few free, even YouTube has a lot of free like long lectures with accompanying supplementary files you can download and work on. So I think that's something that you could consider doing if you really want to work on your digital skills while still in school. Yeah, definitely.
Yes. So yeah, and like what Monica there are online courses for free that you can take with places like the major MIT or in other schools like NTU. NUS also provides online courses, right, that you can take. Is business analytics within the basket of modules for accountancy? Well, not specifically. You do have analytics, right, as part of the accountancy program, in the sense that it is analytics for accounting, right? It's not analytics per se in the general program or in general specialization, right? Now, having said that, right, the curriculum allows you, if you are so interested, to go on and pick up 5 modules, right, on business analytics within the business school to deepen your expertise. So it is not part of the core program, but it is part of your elective program. Right? Yeah, here's a top question. What are some examples of application of business analytics in banking and finance specialization? Well, one example would be in terms of loan assessments. The other could be in the area of valuation of stock prices, right? And there are many others, right, that you would go on, right? This one is for Monica. What is the greatest challenge when studying business analytics?
Okay, the greatest challenge when studying business analytics. Okay, so I think it's quite a bit to do with your time management, right? Because in business analytics, let's say you went down the technical in a group project, because business analytics is certainly, there's quite a number of group projects, and if you don't if you're unable to understand what your group is going with, you'll be left behind, right? Unless you really do make the effort to, hey, I need some help, get some help, actively help yourself to contribute, right? So I think one of the greater challenges would be trying to allocate time properly. So instead of focusing nitty-gritty, going down a rabbit hole for one particular thing, instead you should take a step back, big picture, and the project, it'll work out. But I think that was one of the problems that I personally faced in business analytics. Yeah.
I think that's true. Because it can be I think the challenges that we pose can be quite interesting, like what the project, for example, that Monica presented, and you can get sucked in down a rabbit hole trying to understand, right? But yes, if you keep your business objective in mind, if you keep the questions that you're trying to answer in mind, right, that would save you, right? Is business analytics math heavy? what if my math is not my strong point? Well, we have got you covered, my friend. Right? One is before you come in, right? Before you, at least after you matriculate and come in, we would afford you the opportunity of taking a math refresher course. That math refresher course is open to all business students, right? It is about a 1-week program where we will run through, the fundamentals required for you to sustain, right, the mathematics required in the business school programs, right? And that is general, because when you matriculate, we don't quite know whether you're going into the more quantitative banking and finance, or actuarial science, or business analytics, or the comparatively less quantitative like marketing, human resource consulting, right? So given that, right, we put everybody through a baseline math refresher course, right? I would encourage you, if you feel that you're not strong in math, or returning NS men, right, coming back to school, right, go for that math refresher course, because 2 years without math, right, can degrade some of those skills, right? So we've got you covered if your math is not strong. Now, is business analytics very math heavy? No, it is not. It is heavy in statistics, yes, right, but that's a different kind of math. Yeah, you need to have a good understanding of the basic statistics, and that's covered in year 1, right? You need to have a passion for statistics, right, to survive the program. Anything else there?
Yep, I think maybe something that when I was a prospective student as well, I didn't really consider. I was also quite worried about how difficult the math would be, how difficult how the teaching style would be. But the thing is, here at NBS, they do offer this flipped classroom. So they upload videos detailing all the math that has to be done, and you can, if you are fast, you can speed it up. If you want to look at it more times, over a longer period of time, you can slow it down. And so understanding it is not going to be all that difficult. Yeah, because the resources that NBS provides really doesn't make it impossible for you to go from, like Prof. Damien said, 0 to 100. Yeah, it's very manageable, I feel. Yeah.
Okay. So let's take the top rated one here at the moment. Beyond these projects, are there other internship, exchange, mentorship opportunities available to prepare for our careers? Well, yes, right? In your first year, right, business and accountancy students are strongly encouraged, if not pushed, to do a 10-week professional attachment, right? And that's encouraged. And then, right, we will encourage you to think about undertaking a work-study degree semester, right, where you will go out and work with an organization in your chosen specialization for up to 25 to about 35 weeks, right? Some students have been able to stretch it for about 45 weeks, right? So that one whole semester, you are out working with a particular client, putting into practice what you have studied. And typically students do this in their second year, second semester, or in their third year, first semester, right? And in that is another opportunity we provide. And given that we are a 3-year program, right? So those two are built into our curriculum, and we will give you credit for it. Right? There are opportunities for you to go out and do additional internships as well, and you can do it locally or overseas, and there are opportunities, and we will encourage that. Right? Yeah, I think that would answer that question. Okay. Here's another. What's the difference between studying data science and business analytics? You want to take a cut on that?
Okay. I think data science generally will focus more on the math part of things, and for example, the math behind, for example, neural networks. We look at deep learning and things like that, and not so much. I mean, there is some emphasis, but not as much as business analytics on the business sense. Right. So for the data science specialization, I suppose it would be more of learning the math. How would you optimize these neural networks? How would you build these networks? How do you make it better? How do you optimize them? They focus much more on that aspect, right? As compared to in business analytics, we do learn how to tune certain models. We learn about modifying hyperparameters in the models, but it's not as in-depth as data science, but it's enough. And at the same time, we still focus, it enables you to focus on the business sense and answering questions for the client. What practical use, what practical information does your model tell you?
I think that's a good one, right? So let me build on that, right? So one is about building the neural networks, right? Optimizing, and that's the data science, right? So, but then the data science folks build the tools, the business analytics folks use the tools, right? But in using the tools, they answer an important question. When the results come up, they are able to answer the so what question. They are able to go beyond the statistics to the implications, right, for businesses, that sort of thing. So it's two different disciplines. The business analytics folks cannot survive without the data science folks, right? And the data science folks, if it's not translated into business decisions and all that, they are not going to survive either. So it's two different fields that work hand in hand, right? So it's not so much about competing, it's about collaborating, right? So it's about collaborating, using tools built by one group, right, to apply into the context of another, right? Here's another one. Business and data analytics all sounds good, but in this age of urgency and uncertainty, how do we build up agile decision-making practices? Here, I will focus on practice, right? You need to practice. You need to practice making decisions, right, based on input, based on data. It could be a simple thing as opening up a spreadsheet, right? If you are, whoever asked this question, if you are into football, for example, right, keep a weekly run of your top scorers, about how your clubs are doing, right, and try and use that to predict. Excel has some very good macros and applications that allow you to predict, right, who's going to win the next match, right? Is it Liverpool or Man United? Right? My money is always on Man United, right, winning that thing. Of course, it's statistics, which means you can get it wrong sometimes because you're predicting the future, you don't know, right? But yes, right, keep a list, right? Use the data to make decisions. Budgeting, for example, right? You need to know how much you are spending on certain things, or in terms of budgeting money, budget time. Right? So they're all very personal experiences where you can use data. You churn out a lot of data, right? In terms of your behaviors, in terms of your cognitions, whatever, right? So just start off maybe keeping a track in Excel, right? Or Google Sheets or whatever, right? Keep a track of what you are interested in, what you want to track, what important decisions there are, right? That sort of thing. If you're thinking about which school to go for, right, track its success. If you are, let's say, an accountancy student looking for, trying to decide between maybe the three business schools, look at the passing rates, right, on the national exams for the last 5 years, right? Draw out the trends, draw out the graph, right, for each school. See where we lie in comparison with the others, right? That's a good start to go.
No,
Okay.
I don't think I have any.
Right. So, is it still related to that? Is it still rational to trust your gut feelings? No, not really. Right? If you trust your gut feelings, right? If you trust your gut feelings, you may choose the wrong school to study in. Right. So be careful. Right. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you, Manika, for joining us.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks
and we will see you soon.